to come with a little bit of just insight and like a little bit into this video about what this channel is about, and about like the subject of this channel, and then teachable. So like I think nowadays I just want to say I actually want to be grateful towards YouTube itself with this video, with this platform, because YouTube is a platform for a person to have a voice. And I think that the most the most viable thing that we have in this life is our voice, however we would use it, to a positive or negative or neutral effect. Anything that you would do, what you're really doing at any time, is really your voice. Like I've said in other videos that everything you've been through in your life, not only you but also your ancestors and anyone who has touched your life, it can be appreciated in anywhere that you would occupy at any time. Like right now, I'm at a venue and I'm watching some people cross the street. For them to be standing there at all, each one of those people at all, them two in conjunction at all. There you have a group of two people. It looks like a double date from here. You have a double date there. All of the meaning of their lives, and all their decisions in this life, that to their ancestors, as it has to do with them and their family, puts them right there right now. Then them being friends, whether the man introduced the man to the girl, however they came about being friends, wherever they met, that too, in the nature of their relationships and how they would be crossing the street together, all that is exactly revealed by their position globally, that is right there at that street, where that street is in connection to this, the actual the local region we're in, the broader city, the broader county, the state, the country, the nation, the hemisphere. Then the way that they're walking. In the Holy Bible, there's a scripture, I think it's in Proverbs, it said, how may two walk together though they be in agreement? When you're, sometimes you don't appreciate how much of your heart is engaged in anything that you do, not the least of which the greatest things you do, which is your voice, and what you are, which is also your voice, which is also your footwork. So your real relationship to another person is always betrayed in the feet. And even if you were, say you were watching, like, say you watched like a bout, like a fighting bout, like a heavyweight bout or something like that, or like martial arts or boxing, if you watch their feet all the way from the moment of the all the way of the moment from the respectful or disrespectful touching of the gloves, walking out, then they're beginning to fight, they're dancing, they're feeling each other out, they have a tough round, they show respect at the end of the round, then they get back, they get warmed up to get at it, and then that guy lands him a punch right there. The guy lands him like a TKO, or like something really like a photo, something really like a strong image of a nut, like he concussed him or something. The actual footwork in the way that he concussed him, it shows the nature of that concussion, because there's different ways someone could land a blow. Like somebody could really have it out for that person, they never had any respect at all, or yeah, we're fighting, but this is to make money, so I'm also going to knock you out because we're fighting, or whatever actually the real nature of their relationship was up to the fight, in the fight, their reason for being a fighter, their ethos, all of that is revealed in the footwork if you appreciate it. So it's different. So another example is I recently watched, I had made content about I've actually made several pieces of content about specifically the fighter Jorge Masvidal, who I really look up to as a man, and especially his stance on self defense, respect and comportment, and also doing things for yourself and not asking others to do things, like as protecting yourself before you would seek out authorities as a way of life. And then also Ben Askren, who I think Ben Askren is a very brave man, because he came into MMA as a more of a wrestler and not as a fighter, and that's at a disadvantage. He would have to have appreciated that. Then one his wrestling fighting style. Then he was severely concussed by Jorge Masvidal, and then he too went into further fights of boxing, coming off of that concussion, and doing different things in the name of his family, and suffered a lot of embarrassment with what Jorge Masvidal meted to him. And then on top of that, he had some medical complications, not directly stemming from that, but maybe attendant of some of his life changes that would have attended that concussion. And he was a lot of a man, and smiling and brave through all that. So those two men are incredible to me. But then on top of that, they recently showed a picture, and then after that convincing knockout of Jorge Masvidal, he and Nate Diaz incited their own belt in MMA, which is called the BMF, Baddest Motherfucker belt. And that the fight between him and Nate Diaz is one of the last really something like, we don't have a town square anymore, but sometimes sports and like entertainment can be the closest thing we have to a town square. the actual one of the last times the world came together in terms of attention and eyeballs, so to speak, and media speak, was the actual BMF belt at the end of 2019 with Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz. That was like a really epic thing that happened in New York City, Madison Square Garden, and it was a long time coming for two underdog fighters. I'm not saying they're necessarily underdogs, but they never had their true moment of limelight. If you knew about that sport, you knew how great they were long before that. Like I could appreciate how great Nate Diaz was up to like 5 and 7 years before that, and then I wasn't enough of a true like purist to be aware of Jorge Masvidal, but I could understand his story. And then that fight, it ended very quickly because Nate Diaz had his face was lacerated in there, like I think an eyebrow cut, a formerly lacerated stitch, healed skin division, came back out. And if you know anything about the skin and about injuries, is that any laceration is very easy to re-lacerate. But so but so that fight was a little bit uneventful because of the nature of the way that it stopped. But one thing I really like is that recently, that the only reason I bring that up is because prior to that fight, I had been watching the interviews about like they had like behind the scenes with those fights a lot of times, like for like the Embedded series in UFC, and I happened to watch that one about Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren that summer. That was like July of 19, before that famous flying knee, and I could really tell like it was really incredible, the energy. I watched a fair amount of MMA content, but the energy between Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren was really like actually kind of, it was entertaining but also kind of deep. Like they showed Ben Askren in the car, they're interviewing him, he's like, yeah, but I do all this and I show that, but that guy doesn't know what's coming to him. And then equally Nate Diaz was talking like that, so it was just like a really potent energy between them. And then lo and behold, I found out like that I didn't have enough to afford watching the fights at that time, but I saw it went viral, the actual that episode. But it was kind of amazing, but also uncanny, but also like not surprising that it would have ended like that based on the energy. But if you look at the footwork of Jorge Masvidal when he knocked out Ben Askren, that was his actual real intentions that time, is that he wasn't playing. He came to really take his head off since the bell. And then what came out later is that he had practiced that flying knee with his coach, which also, so that's the interesting thing, is that you actually can't do things without practicing. Even as a fighter, you can't run up and do a flying knee unless you actually practice it that way, because your body can do many things, almost anything, but not without being familiar with it the same way. But I'm saying, and then later I watched the Joe Rogan JRE show. I think it was episode 163 or 169, which was Jorge Masvidal's first appearance on that Joe Rogan, and that had been from earlier that year, before that summer. And he was having that same energy there about like he was really adamant about that fight. So all I'm saying is that people's real footwork, where you're located at any time, but also your footwork while being located somewhere in connection to other people or solo, it really betrays all of who you are and what you are at that point. So you could say that anywhere you're joining me from this video right now, whatever you have going on in your life, whatever you have planned for the rest of your day, all that you've been through in life, all you've learned, all you've experienced, all you suffered, all you've cried, all you won, all you contributed, it places you right where you are right now, and you can really appreciate that in where you'd be located somewhere. So I wanted to say, but so this channel is about like having a voice, and I wanted to say thank you to you for actually allowing people the platform. And I know there's different sophisticated things about the algorithm, about what content would be tractionable and how it's presented to people, but just to have a platform at all. So sometimes in life, not to be griping, but for the sake of I think it's very healthy to communicate yourself. And sometimes when things happen to you, when you're dealt, and so you have injustices and indignities. An indignity is not necessarily an injustice. It can be different degrees of an injustice, because true justice doesn't stop at where our current iteration of law does, because law is arbitrary and interchangeable from one vicinity to another, from one principality. Principality is a word that occurs in the Bible. It's not well understood. There's certain words that are not well understood in modern layman terms. Principality is one. It sounds like municipality, but as I understand, principality is kind of like the lines of authority. That can be like, so say you have a street over there, and that's ran by a group of people. They have business that they have goings on that they do there, and that their actual goings on, whether they're above board, above ground or not, it makes them liable to be there, and they protect people, and they understand themselves as a man's man, stand-up guy, whatever they do for something. that is tipped. They know how far they can that before they would draw attention, or was more significant in any engagement prior to consequences is actually attention. A lot of times, if somebody does wrong, they're not exactly afraid of the consequences, or they wouldn't do wrong. But that they do not suffer the consequences and or mitigate the consequences as they are accustomed to, or if it's skilled to do, attention will hasten or or guarantee consequences. So attention is actually more consequential than consequences themselves, because there's not consequences prior to and outside of attention generally. But another example of that is that I was in Duluth earlier this year, or late last year, last fall actually, and I met a Viking, a Norse descendant. He was Norse and Native American, and he was actually fluent in that spiritual system, and he could draw runes and spell what the runes meant, and he could talk a lot of our actual a lot of entertainment like Hollywood. They're actually directly lifting, borrowing, and ripping off mythology around the world, but not the least of which Norse mythology. Some of your action figures, and also your trending movie films now, the selling of which are actually Viking legend. You can appreciate that when you hear the names. Like there's like, man, that name sounds like a Viking badass. In like consciously or subconsciously, you can appreciate that. But if you actually know what those names mean, they're not just this kind of cool figure that appeared once in time in this Viking thing. They're actually solemn names that have profound traditions and folklore that go with them, and those traditions and folklore correspond with their belief system, their faith system, their ideas, and their symbology. And a lot of it has to do with opportunities for living and dying, like fortune. A lot of it's about fortune, and that too fate. Fate realized is an eventuality, so it has to do with fortune, which is the hastening and the preventing and the enjoyment and suffering of fortune and misfortune. Um, uh, and so that's what a lot of the Viking legend has to do with. But it's not that it's direct. A child could understand it, but it's not as simple, and it's not as pretentious and idolatrous and egotistical as what Hollywood would present it. But what that Viking brother was telling, if you've ever said this, if you've ever been like this, if you were ever this, and he had a couple of characteristics. They were in a lot of faiths. They have like you have like some things you can appreciate, like, okay, that guy's hardworking, that guy's honest, that guy's intrepid. Intrepid means like taking a lot on yourself. But in other faiths, they have it exactly spelled out which specific of those traits means something when together. And in the Viking lore, there's something called, I thought it was hell vigor. That's what he called it. He called it hell vigor. If you've ever been like this, you have been hell vigor at least once. To me, that sounds badass. Wow, hell vigor. But then I said that to a learned man in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, earlier this year, and he was very educated, well-traveled. He said, no, it's actually pronounced hail vigor, and hail means light. So I think that actually the word that we have for hell, it actually means light. So hell, it's not just fire. It's pure fire that's like light. So I think that when you go to hell, or what would be akin of hell, it's like recently I was in this is actually to my point while I'm making this today. So I think they said do in the dark comes to the light, but thereby the light is actually more taxing and more arduous and more severe and more serious than the darkness, because the darkness, you can wiggle room, you can fudge this, you can bury this, you can delay this, you can abuse that in the dark. But in the light, it's, for each action there's a reaction. The light is the consequence, the balance, the harmony, the justice. And so hell may actually be the point at which your deeds and your goings on are revealed to yourself and others, but more significantly yourself, as you cannot. Most of us have cognitive dissonance, so we lie to ourselves, we reason ourselves, we pretend with ourselves, and then we pretend in front of others, and their faith in us, which if we're being fake, it's bad faith, even though it seemed good. That gives us the standpoint to continue to be false with ourselves. But when other people see what you simply are and engage with you what you simply are, that takes away that buffer you are. That may be the light of having your deeds shown back to you or reflected to you or maybe experienced by you. And so to that end, real justice and injustice, it may be tolerated more or less in different venues, but also justice, as we know, is more like of a social thing, I think. So as we understand justice, that's how you deal with other people and how you are dealt with back is justice. But more fundamental than that is how you deal with yourself is how you deal with other people. I was watching a episode by the Game Spitter, and he was saying that when people do things, when people threaten or entertain ideas of self-harm or even lifestyles that are unhealthy, like say that you would hear the word gluttony, and you would say, how is gluttony actually a sin? Gluttony is a sin because one, gluttony can kill you, just like and violence can kill you. Gluttony is a form of violence because one is that food you're being catered to with that food, knowing that it can injure you and maim you. That's the advertisers, commercial industry engaging that you, the people preparing that food, and the people preparing that food, and the people subsidizing your face like that, that is enabling you, are all culprits in your own being maimed by that food. So you could probably say all injustice is attended by all injustice is cooperative. A lot of times people are saying like, yeah, man, like if you listen to rap songs, they would say we this and we again are gonna do this, and it's we over here, we outside. That we is actually like, that's very reminiscent of gang, like a group of people. But also corporations are like that. According to Tashik Bey, corporations are a replication and a re-engineering, bastardization of actually pirating on the high seas. Our military infrastructure is very reminiscent of corporate activity, and corporate activity is reminiscent of military, like in terms of a rank structure and chain of command. But the actual military goings on, a lot of them are from coming to loggerheads, being at odds with different forms of pirating upon the different means, channels of communication and trade lines going back to ancient times, and the viability of any resource.